Welcome to Go There on Fourth, a Christian video podcast about faith, football, and fantasy football. I'm Pastor Jason Barnett, aka the Dirt Path Pastor. I'm not a football expert. I'm not a fantasy football expert. I am just a football junkie. I love the game, and I am journeying with you, me together, through this fantasy football season. I confused myself with the wording there. I'm just sharing how my fantasy football team is doing with you. I'm sharing my game picks along the way, some fantasy advice. And this is the Tuesday edition. We have an episode every Thursday and Tuesday. Thursday I make game picks, and today is Tuesday where I share the results of those game picks from the week before. So after week one, I was 7-9 on my game picks. So I'm looking to improve my 43% accuracy rate. Let's jump right in and see how I did in my game picks. In the Vikings versus the Eagles, I had picked the Eagles to win, and they did. DeAndre Swift had 28 carries for 175 yards. He was the highest scoring running back in our league, which was awesome. Now, for those of you that are Swift owners in fantasy football, yes, he had an amazing week, and I would look for him to continue. But one thing I would caution you on is the fact that the Eagles they have a whole stable of running backs, and so far Swift has looked the best. But there are some other running backs too, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're a team that rides the hot hand whenever they get a chance. Packers versus the Falcons. I had picked the Packers to win this one, but if you go back and you listen to the Thursday episode, I did share I was worried about the Falcons being able to run the ball, and that might be the downfall of the Packers in this game, and that turned out to be a correct prediction. The Falcons rushed for 211 yards on the ground. It's hard to beat anybody when you give up that many rushing yards. So the Falcons win that one, so I got that one wrong. Raiders versus the Bills. Picked the Bills to win. I believe Josh Allen was going to have a bounce-back week, and he certainly did. He went 31 of 37 for 274 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Raiders. So I got that pick right. Ravens versus the Bengals. I picked the Ravens in this one, and I said it was if Lamar was Lamar again. And what helped Lamar be Lamar again in this game was he had Mark Andrews back. And the thing is, it's because we all love our security blanket. And Mark Andrews is that security blanket for Lamar Jackson. And he was back in the lineup, and it proved to be a dynamic combination. So I got that pick as the Ravens beat the Bengals. Seahawks versus the Lions. I thought, the Lions are at home. They're coming off a big win against the Chiefs. They've got some momentum. They had all that momentum coming from the offseason into this matchup here. And I just really thought they would win. I also thought the Seahawks would have trouble with Hutchinson. But the Seahawks only gave up 1 sack, and it was not to Hutchinson. So the Seahawks won that one. So I missed that pick. Chargers versus the Titans. I thought surely the Chargers would have too much offense for the Titans to keep up with. Turns out Titans only had 1 less total yard of offense than what the Chargers did. The Chargers had 342 to the Titans 341, but that didn't matter because the Titans found a way to win the game. So I got that pick wrong. Bears versus the Bucks. I thought we would see Justin Fields take another step forward again this week. Maybe that was wishful thinking. I had picked the Bears to beat the Bucks, and Fields just did not play great. Yes, he had 211 yards passing, but he just missed some open throws and things like that. He missed some opportunities to make some throws to wide open receivers. But I don't think the focus should be on how bad the Bears was, and I don't think it should be on how bad Justin Fields played in that game. I actually think what we should really be talking more about is the Buccaneers and how well they have been playing here in these last couple weeks. Baker Mayfield seems to have gotten off to a hot start. He's fitting with his teammates. They're playing well together. I don't think the Buccaneers are going away in a wide open division. I mean, the Saints have the best defense in the division, but really right now, that NFC South is up for grabs, and we'll see how it plays out. It might be an interesting division to watch moving forward. Anyway, I picked the Bears win, Bucks won. I got that one wrong. Chiefs versus the Jaguars. I actually picked the Jaguars to win this one. I picked kind of an upset. Trevor Lawrence is kind of talk of a potential MVP candidate, but man, he kind of had a poor game this week. I think having Jones back on the defense for the Chiefs really helped them out. It kind of gave some relief to that secondary, being able to rush the passer. I didn't look up the sack totals in this one, but I did notice Lawrence was 22 of 41. So he only completed 53% of his passes. Last week they gave up 63% to Jared Goff. So maybe that gives some indication of how much better the Chiefs' defense is with Jones in the lineup. But I got that pick wrong. Colts versus the Titans. I picked the Colts to win this one, not just because I'm a Colts fan, and not just because I bleed Colts blue, but because I actually thought this was a good matchup featuring two young quarterbacks, and I just felt like the Colts had a better defense than what the Texans did. And even though Anthony Richardson went out with a concussion early in this one, he's already at 3 rushing touchdowns for the season. That's awesome. Now, because the game was out of market where I live, I didn't get to watch this one. I didn't get to see any of the pass attempts he had. But the fact that he already has 3 rushing touchdowns this early in the season tells us the ceiling that Richardson has. Yes, he's running the ball a little bit more, and he's maybe more of a threat running than he is passing, but there have been some flashes with him passing the ball as well. So, again, as Colts fans, we should be excited. There's a high upside here that we're really beginning to see. And what also is encouraging is that when Anthony Richardson went down, Gardner Minshew stepped in, and the offense actually did not miss a beat. And yes, it was way different. The running threat at quarterback kind of shrank a little bit, but man, Minshew was able to come in and just sling the ball around to wide open receivers. Really pay attention to Michael Pittman's numbers between the first half and the second half. So again, that gives us an idea how good the receiving core is too. As Richardson's trying to figure out the passing game a little bit and get more comfortable in that, Minshew was able to step in and show us what the Colts receivers were actually capable of doing. So as Colts fans, we should be really excited. Our defense played really well through 3 quarters. We had 6 sacks and 1 fumble recovery. Yes, our secondary had some off moments, but remember, they're a young secondary. They're mostly rookies playing in that defensive backfield. So they're only going to get better with more game experience and things like that. So I'm not too terribly alarmed about the secondary. It might be a problem all season long, but again, when you have rookies in the lineup, that's what's going to happen. Well, anyway, I picked the Colts to win. The Colts won. So I went 4-5 in these early games, which puts me 11-14 on the season so far. So I'm actually 1 game more under 500 after the early games. Like I said, this is a Christian video podcast about faith football and fantasy football. And for the faith part, I always like to share a brief devotional with you. And today's devotional is kind of centering around Mike McDaniel, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, and his halftime interview. Now, I'm not going to focus on the fact that he played a little game of foot race with the cameraman or anything. I'm not getting that. I'm focusing on more on some things that he said. As they're going to halftime, they're in this hard-fought game against the Patriots, and Bill Belichick, who's known for his scheming and plans and things like that. But the Dolphins kind of had out-schemed the Patriots there in the first half. And as they're going into the halftime, the reporter kind of asked McDaniel, and was like, what have you done to get the team ready? What have you done to help the team execute in this moment? And I loved Coach McDaniel's answer. He says, I haven't done anything. The players have done a great job executing stuff. So he's acknowledging, yes, I am the coach. Yes, I am the leader, the one responsible to get these players ready. I'm the one responsible to put together a game plan and make sure the players know what that game plan is. But at the end of the day, Mike McDaniels is not the one out there throwing the passes. Mike McDaniel's not the one out there trying to find the running lanes. Mike McDaniel's not the one out there running pass routes. He's not lining up at nose tackle. He's not playing linebacker, and he's not playing defensive back. That's not what Mike McDaniels is out there doing. Mike McDaniel's job is to coach the players, get them ready to play, and have the game plan ready. And so when he says, I haven't done anything, the players have done a great job executing stuff, he's saying, look, I gave them all the tools that I possibly could to be successful, and guess what? They've been executing according to what their role within the team is, according to their abilities within that role, and they're doing a great job. He acknowledged that the reason they were being successful was not necessarily because he, as the leader, was doing anything in that moment, but because his players were executing the game plan that he had communicated and shared with them, that they had studied and prepared for. They were using their abilities to bring McDaniel's game plan to life. Now, he does go on to say, that there are some things that they needed to clean up, right? And that they would press forward. He recognized that yes, there were mistakes made, that the team and players could learn from. And as a leader, he was going to address those mistakes and those problems so the team could learn and grow from them. But that doesn't mean they were not doing a good job. It just means there's some things that they had to, as an organization, as a team, where they had to grow from those moments. And at the same time, that meant, too, they were going to press forward. Yes, they played a great first half, but football is a game of two halves, right? There's 4 quarters, and you got to play all 4 of them if you want to win the game. And so he was saying, you know what? We've played well up to this point. We're going to make our adjustments. We're going to learn from our mistakes, and then we're going to press forward to try and win the game. And as he said that, it got me thinking about leadership. And so much of society today thinks that leadership is the guy that or the woman that can scream the loudest, has the most authority that they can wield around like Thor's hammer and knock people around with. They think that leadership is screaming at people and forcing them to do it the leader's way, and the leader micromanaging those people until they know how to do the job the way the manager wants. And yes, I guess leadership can be done that way, but in my experience and from what I've seen in the world, when leaders act that way, they tend to not be successful. They tend to not last as leaders very long. Because people don't like micromanagers. Think about when someone tries to micromanage you. We don't like it. It upsets us. We would like, I don't want to. Just let me do it the way I would do it, right? When someone's barking orders at us, it's hard to concentrate when we're constantly being yelled at. It's hard to feel comfortable in what we're doing because we're afraid if we make a mistake that they're going to come micromanage and yell at us some more. That's not true leadership. That's not leadership according to Scripture, and that's just not good leadership practices in general. And I think Jesus actually gives us a good illustration of leadership in Scripture in Luke chapter 9. And so in Luke 9, verse 1, it talks about Jesus. He's going to send out the 12 to go and do the work of the kingdom. So we're going to read these verses here in Luke 9, 1 through 6. And it says, when Jesus had called the 12 together, he gave them power and authority to drive out all demons and to cure diseases. And he sent them out to preach the kingdom of God, to heal the sick. He told them, take nothing for the journey, no staff, no bread, no bag, no money, no extra tunic. Whatever house you enter, stay there until you leave that town. If people do not welcome you, shake the dust off your feet when you leave their town as a testimony against them. So they set out and went from village to village, preaching the gospel and healing people everywhere. So Jesus has these 12 men that are following him. And he's going to send them out 2 by 2 into these different villages with his authority and his instructions. First off, Jesus sends them out. Jesus is not physically going with them. He is sending them out with his authority and his instructions. He is trusting that these disciples are going to be able to go out and carry out the work of the kingdom on their own without him looking over the shoulder and watching them. He is trusting them that they can do this. Keep in mind, these 12 disciples, these aren't the 12 apostles that we're going to read about in Acts yet. They are still growing from being fishermen and tax collectors and zealots and the people that they were when Jesus found them. They are growing into the people, the 12 apostles we're going to read about in the book of Acts. They're not there yet. They're at the very beginning of this. They're students learning at the feet of Jesus. And here Jesus is saying, I'm going to trust you as my students, as my followers, enough to send you out to do the work of the kingdom that I've been doing. Jesus trusts them with his authority and with his instructions. Yes, Jesus gives us some very specific instructions that he expects them to carry out. But Jesus sends them out. He sends them out as the people that they are, trusting that they care enough about Jesus and the kingdom of God. They care enough about the people they're ministering to trust them with the abilities that he's given them. So what's this teach us about leadership? Well, first off, it involves us giving instructions, not barking orders. If you are a leader, don't bark your orders. Don't stand up there and yell and say, do it this way or that way. No, instruct, give instructions. Treat the people that you're instructing as people. Treat them as a person who's learning and growing and trying to do their best to work on your behalf to meet the needs of the organization that you're leading. Trust them. Trust them enough to instruct them, to give them orders instead of barking at them. And then lastly, the other thing about leadership Jesus teaches us is trusting those you give instructions to be able to carry it out. Trust the people with the instructions you give them. If you give a person a task, trust that they will be able to carry that task out. And yes, you may give them very specific instructions, but understand each and every one of us is different. And so they may carry out your instructions to the T, but not in the manner that you would do it. And that's okay. And sometimes that's better because that strengthens an organization. Because now you not only have one person, the leader, who can do it, but now you have somebody else who is capable of doing it, but doing it in a different manner that might be more effective with one person or a situation than what the leader might do. That's awesome. Our job is not to compete with one another to the point where we're not encouraging one another on. No, we, as a leader, our job is to raise up others around us who can potentially, we're doing our job correctly if they become a threat to take our job because they're doing our job just as well as we are. Or they're carrying out tasks just as well as we are capable of. And that should be a badge of honor to us, not of, oh, I better watch out, this young one's coming to steal my job. No, it should be, yes, they are getting it, they're growing, they're learning. And because that only strengthens the organization. That only strengthens the team. That only makes the team more effective. So we need to be able to trust those we're giving instructions to be able to carry out what it is that they've been instructed to do, and letting them be themselves in the process. Now, here's the thing. We have to ask ourselves, do we trust our team members? Do we trust those that we have been placed in a leadership role over? Do we trust them? If the answer is no, if we don't trust them, then the first question we need to ask is why? Why don't I trust them? Is it them? Do we not trust them? Then perhaps if we don't trust them, then maybe they shouldn't be in the role that they're in. Or perhaps we need to spend more time getting to know them. Perhaps we need to think about and work through how we need to instruct things better to them and communicate better. So sometimes that is the case. Sometimes we can't trust the person that is on the team. We can't trust him with those abilities. And perhaps we're trying to put them in a role that they are not suited for, that they don't fit. And that can happen too, and that's okay. Sometimes we need to help them find a different role where their skills and their talents can be used in a more beneficial way to the team and the organization. Now, going back to that question of do we trust them and why? If we say no, we don't trust them, sometimes though, instead of it being the person we don't trust, perhaps it's our own insecurities causing us to not trust them. Again, we're afraid they might take our job. We're afraid they might be better at it than we are. We're afraid they might not do it our way. Those are legitimate fears that leaders have when they're giving out responsibilities to people. But then in that moment, it's not the person that they don't trust. It's our own insecurities as a leader shining through. And we need to acknowledge that insecurity about ourselves. And sometimes it's healthy to confess that insecurity about ourselves to the team member and to the team as a whole. So that way they can help us work through those abilities or those insecurities. You cannot be an effective leader if you're worried all the time about someone coming along and taking your job. You can't be effective as a leader if you're worried about someone coming along that does it better than you. No, our job as a leader is to lead the team forward for the benefit of the organization as a whole. That applies to the kingdom of God. That applies to, any organization that you work for. The growth and improvement of the team members around you is not a hindrance to you. It's not a reason to be insecure. It's a reason to get excited. It's a reason to know that you're being effective as a leader, because it's only going to benefit the team and the organization as a whole. Well, if you like that devotional, I encourage you to visit Ravenna Church of the Nazarene. That's where I'm pastor at. We're located here in Ravenna, Kentucky, located at 530 Main Street. We have services every Sunday at 10:45 a.m. We'd love to have you join us in person. If not, we do live stream on our Facebook page. You'll be more than welcome to watch that way. And you can also catch our weekly sermons on the Dirt Pass Sermon Podcast, available on all your favorite podcast apps. All right, let's go back to my game picks for the week. So heading into the late Sunday afternoon games, we have the 49ers versus the Rams. And the Niners won, and I was really concerned about this being a defensive struggle. And actually, the score was I think it was 30-24, 31-24, somewhere in there. And for Brock Purdy did not throw any touchdown passes this game. That kind of played out that way. Again, that speaks to the talent on the Rams defense. But what kind of did surprise me about this game, even though I got the game pick right, the Niners won, I really thought Stafford would struggle because he likes to take shots downfield to his wide receivers. He doesn't tend to check things down as much. And he's going against a really good 49ers defense, but he was still able to put up 300 yards against the 49ers. So if you're looking for a quarterback, because I know in ours, Matthew Stafford set on the waiver wire, at least through week 1. I haven't checked to see if he's still there in week 2. But he might be a quarterback worth looking at and stashing on your bench at this point. I mean, if he's going to put up 300 yards against the 49ers, he may not be quite the same old Matthew Stafford that we're used to, but he's Matthew Stafford. So he's someone to think about. So the 49ers won that one, so I got that pick right. Giants versus the Cardinals. And, man, I was watching this game from a distance, and I kept thinking, boy, I picked the Giants to win. I thought, surely there's no way they're going to get shut out 2 weeks in a row. Surely they're too good of a team to lose to the Cardinals, who I believe are trying to tank to get the first pick in the draft. But what a rally by Daniel Jones and the Giants to come back and win that game by as many points as they were trailing by, as poorly they had played really from the entire season until that point, and then to take off and win the game. The big negative coming out of that is the loss of Saquon Barkley, and prayers out to Saquon Barkley. We hope for a speedy recovery. We hate to hear this for you. But the Giants were able to get the W in this one, so I got that pick right. Jets versus the Cowboys, and I knew the Jets were going to struggle in this one. The Cowboys' defense is scary good. I mean, I don't remember seeing a defense with this many takeaways, this many sacks through 2 weeks of the season. I know they played the Giants and then they played the Jets. But, man, I have not seen a defense do this. And the Cowboys as a whole look scary good, but the defense is way better than the offense. Now, what did surprise me in this game was how poorly the Jets defense played. And I don't know if it's because they're a little deflated that with the Aaron Rodgers injury or what, or maybe they were just out-schemed by the Cowboys. I don't know. But the Cowboys look scary good, and the Jets defense was kind of disappointing in this game. Hopefully they can bounce back next week. But I picked the Cowboys win. Cowboys win, got that one right. Commanders versus the Broncos. I had mentioned on Thursday that I just don't see Sean Payton-led team losing 2 games in a row. Surely they would improve from the previous week, and they jumped off to a really big lead. I thought, yeah, it's playing out just the way I thought it would. And then here comes Sam Howell and the Commanders, and they through quarters 2 through 4, they outscored the Broncos 32-19. They dominated outside of the first quarter against the Broncos in this one. So Commanders got the win. I got that one wrong, but wow, Commanders 2-0 to start the season off. That's incredible. I didn't expect them to be 2-0 at this point. Sam Howell is definitely their quarterback moving forward. So don't write off the Commanders this season. So the late afternoon games, I went 3-1, maybe 7-6 on the week, which puts me at 14-15 on the season. So I'm back within a game of being on the positive end of game picks this year. So, and I'm in the positive for week 2, so that's good. So how did my fantasy football team? My fantasy football team is called, I was never given a name. I'm in a 12-team PPR league with some other custom scoring aspects involving church folks and friends. And I started off 1-0, and I was in a bit of a uphill battle this week. I'm playing against the number 2 leading scoring team after week 1, and I didn't know that I had enough the firepower on my roster to match what they had. Even though the projections had us within a couple points of each other, maybe it was more like 6 or 7. But I just didn't know if I had the firepower with all my roster to be able to keep up and keep within the game. And even then, the players I had to play up to their potential. So I went with Jordan Love at quarterback. If you remember, I had Brock Purdy on the bench, and I just like Jordan Love's matchup with the Falcons better than I did Purdy's against the Rams. And that turned out to be a good prediction because Love had 3 touchdowns to Purdy's 0. Yes, Purdy had about 100 more yards, maybe 75 more yards, somewhere in there. But those touchdowns were a big deal. So Jordan Love actually in my league ended up outscoring Brock Purdy. So that turned out to be a wise decision. I had Tony Pollard at running back 1 versus the Jets. He had 109 yards of offense with 32 touches in the game. So some of our custom scoring is PPR plus you get points for targets and carries. And so it was a big game for Tony Pollard in that one. Dameon Pierce was my running back 2 versus the Colts. He had decent points in our league, but that was only because of touches. If you had him in your league, he probably was a bit of a letdown this week, but because we get points the way we do, he turned out to still be a pretty decent play for me on that one. St. Brown versus the Seahawks. He had 102 yards receiving with 6 receptions and only a little over 3 quarters. So that worked out really well for me. The problem is now moving forward, he has a big giant Q next to his name again because he left early in the fourth quarter. The reports seem to indicate that was leg cramps, but that's something to monitor here as we head into week 3. My receiver 2 is Jalen Waddle versus the Patriots. He had 8 catches. So far this season, Waddle has 8 catches, 164 yards, but he hasn't scored a touchdown yet. I'm not alarmed by that. What is concerning is he still has a big red Q next to his name as well. So hopefully, I know he's been dealing with an injury here the first 2 weeks of the season, and I can only imagine that playing the Patriots didn't help that at all. As hard as their defense plays and hits people, I'm sure he's a little bit sore heading into week 3 here. But Waddle is a guy that, again, I'm keeping in the lineup regardless of what happens, unless he's injured. Mark Andrews, he was back for the Ravens against the Bengals, and Lamar loves Andrews. And as a fantasy owner, I love having Mark Andrews as my tight end. There's only one other tight end I would rather have, but Mark Andrews is one you stick in and you leave in the lineup if he's healthy. Because Lamar loves to throw to Mark Andrews. At my flex is what got me in trouble fantasy football-wise this week. I went with Breece Hall versus the Cowboys, and I was really nervous about it because the Jets, they're not the same offense without Aaron Rodgers. And I was really worried Breece Hall would struggle, and he only ended up with 4 carries and 2 targets in the passing game, which he didn't have a catch. So I only ended up with, I think it was 5 points from Breece Hall in our league, and that's just not going to cut it at the flex spot. And the week when I was already overmatched, that did not help me out at all. I could have went with Christian Kirk from the Jaguars, who actually turned out to have a solid fantasy game according to our league scoring. But I just was not comfortable with really playing a receiver at the flex spot because running backs tend to get more touches, and the way our league scores, the players that have more touches are the players you want in those key spots. It would have worked out if I played Christian Kirk. I still don't think I would have won, but it would have definitely helped me a lot more than what happened with Breece Hall this week. I do know Breece Hall was listed as questionable heading into this one, so I'm not sure if that injury played a factor into his limited touches, and perhaps them going against the Cowboys defense and the way things were going, they just thought, let's not risk it. Let's limit his touches in this game and look forward to the rest of the season. So we'll see we'll monitor Breece Hall moving forward. At defense, I went with the Colts versus the Texans because, remember, I was excited. My Colts defense was going against a rookie quarterback, and boy, it proved to turn out well. Yes, they gave up 20 points, but they had a fumble recovery and 6 sacks. Anytime your defense comes away with a fumble, with a turnover, and sacks in the game, you should be excited in fantasy football, and that's what happened with the Colts. Kicker, I had Nick Folk, who went 2 for 2 with his field goals and had 3 extra points, so decent outing, for your kicker. Now, unfortunately, again, the Hall really hurt my point total. So we didn't have enough then. So my team has started off 0-2 for the football season. So again, my show's just living up to the hype, right? I said that I'm probably going to give you some terrible fantasy football advice, and it's proving to be true because I'm at 0-2. So, how's your team do? What cost you this week? What surprised you this week? Please leave a comment. Send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. You can use my link tree down in the show notes if you're listening to this on the podcast. If you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, just shoot me a message or a comment, and I would love to chat with you. All right, we have 3 games left to look at. on my game picks. These were the primetime game picks. Dolphins versus the Patriots. I picked the Dolphins in this one because I thought the Dolphins just had way too much offense and the Patriots wouldn't be able to keep up. And that proved true. The Dolphins had 389 yards of offense to the Patriots 288. I just really felt like that was the difference in the game. Is the Patriots really just are not built to play from behind for one thing and play in a high, fast-paced scoring game. And they just don't have the players to be able to do that. And the Dolphins can. Saints versus the Panthers. I really expected Bryce Young to struggle against the Saints, and he was sacked 4 times. Now, he was 22 of 33 for 153 yards, and he didn't have a touchdown, but he also didn't throw an interception, so that was kind of promising. So if you're a Panthers fan, you have reasons to be excited. He went against Bryce Young went against that great defense. Yes, he was sacked 4 times, but he didn't seem to be rattled by the pressure, and he didn't have any costly thrown interceptions in that one. I did pick the Saints to win. The Saints won that one. Browns versus the Steelers. Terrible what happened to Nick Chubb. Awful injury. I did see some pictures of it. I didn't see a video of it, but I did see some pictures of the injury itself. And just prayers for Nick Chubb. I hate that this happened. Hopefully he can come back from this. It may not be this season, but hopefully next season we'll see him back on the field. I just hate that happened. Now, on the other side, the other thing I noticed in this game is I believe in this game we saw the real Deshaun Watson yesterday. We saw the Deshaun Watson grabbing face mask and kind of starting stuff with other players on the defense yesterday. And that's all I'm going to say about that. We saw the real Deshaun Watson playing on the field yesterday. But I picked the Steelers to win. The Steelers won that game. So actually, I went 3-0 in the primetime picks for this week in the Sunday night, Monday night games. And actually, I am 5-0 on the Sunday night, Monday night game picks for the week. For week 2, I went 10-6, puts me at 17-15 on the season. I'm back in the black, so that's awesome. As we wrap things up, I'm going to kind of go back through my players I like, the players I don't like. Remember, I gave you some players I like that you can put in your players I didn't like. I told you I liked Mac Jones versus the Dolphins. 231 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty good for Mac Jones, but was it enough to really put you over in your fantasy league? I don't know. Was it enough to put him in the like spot? I don't know. He didn't hurt you, so that was the good news. I did say I don't like Dak Prescott versus the Jets. He had 255 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He played way better than I thought he would against the Jets defense. And again, was that because of the Cowboys offense, or was that because of the Jets defense, a combination of the two? I don't know. But Dak played way better in that one than I had thought he would. Running back, I said I like the Falcons running backs versus the Packers. They had 211 yards on the ground. Robinson actually had 124 yards in this one. I think Algiers had about 40-something. So Robinson definitely had a better game out of the 2 running backs, but he didn't have a touchdown in that one. Running back I didn't like was Miles Sanders against the Saints, and he only had 43 yards on 14 carries. If you're in a PPR league, it may not have been as bad, but it still was not good. And so that one proved to be true. Receivers, I said I like Devontae Smith versus the Vikings. He ended up having 4 catches, 131 yards, and a touchdown in that. So I thought that was a pretty good call. I did say I didn't like Brandon Ayuk versus the Rams, and that proved to be true as well. He only had 3 catches on 6 targets for 43 yards. So that was a rough outing for him, fantasy football-wise. A tight end, I've been raving about it all episode. I liked Mark Andrews versus the Bengals. He had 5 catches on 8 targets, 45 yards, and a touchdown. Welcome back, Mark Andrews. We're so glad you're back on the field, even though you're playing the Colts this week, so I'm kind of conflicted in my excitement about that. I did say I didn't like Tyler Higbee versus the 49ers, and he had 7 targets and only caught 3 of them. And I can't remember how many yards he had, but the yardage total didn't amount to a whole lot. So he did struggle against the 49ers defense. And also because Stafford likes to throw the ball downfield to receivers. Defense, I like the Colts versus the Texans. And again, they had 1 fumble recovery, 6 sacks. The yards and points hurt some, but again, turnovers and sacks is what you're looking for from your defense. I did say I didn't like the Falcons versus the Packers. They gave up 24 points and had 1 sack in the game. So call that one what you will. So that's kind of how I fared in my players I like, I don't like. Do you have any questions about faith or football? Please feel free to send them to me. I hope you enjoyed this show. Do me a favor, hit like and share on the episode wherever you're watching or listening from. And also be sure to check out the Dirt Pastorman podcast and follow me on TikTok where I do devotional videos and things like that. Until Thursday, happy fantasy football.